So, what's a professional market research executive doing running a database company, Robert?
Well, as you well know now, Bob, the whole idea of big data, not only does it cover direct marketing companies, advertising agencies are very interested in this space and trying to understand it. And it really reaches out to the traditional territory of market research companies. If you remember the last time we spoke, I had given a clear indication then how interested I was in expanding the expertise that we'd built up during my days in the research industry into the whole area of data analytics and data intelligence. And I guess this role is now a natural extension of that interest.
There has been an evolution in that direction. I remember when I started RFL Communications in 1995, the thought among market researchers of doing anything with database people was, oof, don't want to touch that. But gradually over the years, it has really become much more of a situation that seemed to be a mesh, and some companies more than others were really getting into that integration. So has that been accelerating as I'm just describing?
I feel it certainly has. You would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised, by how familiar some of the things that we do in Harte-Hanks are to tasks that I was completing when I worked in the market research industry. The tools and techniques, simple issues like storing data, using it, integrating one data set with another data set, those were all issues that we grappled with in the market research world. And all I see here in Harte-Hanks is the fact that we're taking that a step further. I think the term that I heard some folks use within Harte-Hanks is applied market research. And that's another way of looking at the whole issue of using data. So we take it right from the creative and designing the campaigns, the analytics around the data, and then absolutely through the execution of the campaign itself and eventually analysis of the response levels. There's a lot of overlap.
So I've heard Axiom linked with quite a few market research operations in recent years. Is the same true at Harte-Hanks?
I believe, yes, that is the case. We're a big user of research. When we use external research agencies to do work around segmentation, for example, on some of our campaigns to help with that. And indeed, even within our organization, within Harte-Hanks, we have a business unit, which is a business consulting division called Aberdeen, which is a market research company. So we actually have some of our own research capabilities within Harte-Hanks.
Mm-hmm. What can you specifically bring to Harte-Hanks with your research background that maybe it has been lacking?
I think it's a number of things. It's clearly not around the technical skills, because as anybody will tell you who knew me in market research, I wasn't a technical researcher. I think the things that I bring to it, to the company, will be trying to define a very clear strategy for our organization in an industry and with a particular part of that industry, data, giving clarity to a strategy to map out the next 3 to 5 years for us. And that's not dissimilar to the work I carried out in the research industry. Giving us a client focus, very important as well. Again, my background is very much as a client person, as a sales guy in these organizations. And the way in which you service a client in Harte-Hanks is not very dissimilar to how we looked after clients in the research world.
Mm-hmm. Can research companies themselves become a much larger emphasis as a potential client for Harte-Hanks?
They could do. Actually, I think that what may eventually happen, and this is one of the theories that I'd like to test, both with people within Harte-Hanks, but also some of the other leading industry thinkers, about whether research doesn't ultimately belong within a data company, a bigger data company.
And if that were the case, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, that could lead to acquisitions down the road?
I think we see quite a few acquisitions in this part of the marketing world. We look, and I noticed with the Publicis Omnicom link up and the talk there about the way in which digital agencies were being created. And a lot of that was through acquisition. So I think acquisition would naturally fit in as part of the idea on digital direct marketing. And particularly with the growth of the databases that are coming out of social media these days, we've got to think in terms of expanding our knowledge around technology and around these social media areas, and that's going to happen through acquisition.
What kind of growth rate has Harte-Hanks had in recent years?
Not very much growth, and that's part of the reason. One of the reasons that I came in is to try to promote that growth. A large part of the Harte-Hanks business has been around more conventional or traditional direct marketing. It's only in fairly recent years that we've started to reach out to the digital direct marketing and the creative, the agency side of the business. And what we're finding is that the more traditional methods of direct marketing, particularly around mail, that industry hasn't got significant growth in it. The industry stats for the last 12 months and the next 12 months are very similar and show growth that's below 1% for that industry segment. When you look at the section around digital direct marketing, however, the growth figures there quoted by the industry are in double digits. So part of my job, part of the role, and I've talked to our staff about this, I've talked to our clients, and I'm talking to the investors in Harte-Hanks about how we devise a path that takes us from more traditional, which will still remain important, but also into these new territories.
Okay. The low-hanging fruit vis-a-vis your research opportunities we've already mentioned. Is there a grouping of other, perhaps less developed research potentials out there?
I'm not focused on that at the moment. I would be much more thinking about the use of some of the core tools that we would have found in market research. Things around customer satisfaction type analytics are more the direct focus that I would have at the moment.
Are things already in place at Harte-Hanks that are being done with research companies that could be dramatically expanded?
I feel so. I think as certainly as the channels for communication with consumers develop, and I've mentioned already that sort of growth in social media now and trying to get two-way communication going with the consumers, I think there's a whole range of things there that we can try to adopt more conventional type analytics services to. And some of those will be about conventional market research techniques overlaid on top of all of the other material that we're gathering from lots of different sources. But the big challenge at the moment really relates, I think, how to organize and start to think about how we get this data into a format that we can use. Right now, the focus seems to be on gathering as much as you possibly can, hence the big data. And as it turns out, there is a lot of stuff there. But I watched a clip this morning on Bloomberg TV, for example, called "Drowning in Big Data." And I listened to a lady from MasterCard, an SVP at MasterCard, Sarah Quinlan, I think was her name, talk about the sheer volume of information they're trying to grapple with, and the fact that they're often seeing now trends buried deep back in that database, long before public figures are released to tell us what's happening in an economy. So I think the challenges are around intelligent organization of that data and then effective manipulation of it.
Okay. When somebody or a company that is as well ensconced in an industry as Harte-Hanks is in its, um, makes a transition or starts to make a transition to expand its perspective and its potential interests and that sort of thing, there are obviously, some cultural things that can kind of get in the way because of what's gone on in the past. Is that a problem at all, in your perspective, or do you have kind of a free hand to really take this company into some really radically new directions?
Well, it's not a problem, it's a challenge. When you're changing any culture, that takes a period of time. But if you give effective direction and it's very clear what we're trying to get to, then I think that strong cultures can be very helpful for you, but as long as they embrace the idea that you're putting forward in the first instance. So my first few weeks, and I've spent virtually since the first day I joined, traveling around our various offices. I see people who don't look as if they're a problem in any way, or even really a challenge. I look at people who are very hungry for the next step in the Harte-Hanks story.
Probably looking for some direction.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what I've got to do. I've got to work with a senior management team here to define what that direction will look like. But I don't think it's something for us to go radically different on. This is not a revolution. This is the next chapter in Harte-Hanks' story. And it's a story that's been around since 1920, and I think will continue to evolve.
Okay.
The pace of evolution is getting a little
Are
faster.
you going to have to inject some other research individuals' expertise into the company? Um, it's probably not the best analogy, but Moses couldn't take on everything all at once himself. He had to bring in a bunch of other people to handle the day-to-day affairs. Is that what you're going to have to do?
Well, I've never worked in a company where I've been able to do everything myself anyway. I always worked in a team environment. I've got good people here that I'm working with right now, and we will only be able to determine the skill sets that we need when we know what our journey is going to be. Then from that, our HR agenda, our people agenda will determine the skill sets that either we need to train into our existing staff, or some skill sets that we may have to bring in. And we can hire those people, we may acquire them through acquisition, a range of different ways we can get that.
Have you spoken basically to the company as a whole and delivered a message? And if so, what was that message?
I did speak to the company as a whole on my first day and my third day. I think the third day just to reassure them that I had come back on day two. But the message initially is a very simple message. I'm coming as an outsider, and I think I'm the first real outsider that's come in leadership in Harte-Hanks. So although I had a background in research and media in general, I'm coming in as an outsider. So I wanted to reassure them that some of the basic values that I would have as a CEO, just to make sure they were aware of that. And I talked to them about the importance of communication in an organization, particularly one as diverse, both geographically and with skill sets as Harte-Hanks. I talked the importance of clients and understanding client relationships in this day and age in media. And I talked about the fact that I believe that direct marketing, just as I believed in research, that it's a people-based business, and therefore talent and the securing of best talent will be fundamental for us going forward.
Is this the first time you've been in a position where you've had to practically learn a brand new industry?
Yes, probably. I worked in that research industry for so many years, probably 25 odd years. But, whilst I worked on the research side of things, I was also helping to guide on the media side of the business, and I had fair oversight of that for a period of time. And in some ways, with the expansion of the research network, when we branched out into other things like business consulting within research, or when we went to the gathering of retail audit type data, those were allied industries, not brand new. And actually, I go back to what I said at the front of our discussion, that it's a different industry, but you would be surprised how much of it feels the same.
How long do you, in your own mind, think it's going to take to really understand the nooks and crannies of what Harte-Hanks is all about and the industry in which it does function?
I'll not get involved in the nooks and crannies, because I think if I'm a CEO and I'm in the nooks and crannies, then there's got to be something wrong. I think
It gets down to understanding.
yeah. So it's down to understanding.
Not
Yeah,
only the high level stuff, but
right.
some of the stuff at the foundation that is
Yeah,
really instrumental to the company.
right. I mean, you have to know the reach of the business itself. So you need just enough knowledge to be able to make sensible high level decisions, but you do not want to get sucked into the day to day. We have very capable people who do that. I, I did the second quarter earnings call last week, and I've said that my onboarding with the organization will not finish until at least the end of fall. So that's what, 3 4 months, I guess, to at least to get to know my own footprint, and to have met staff from all parts of our business. I'm visiting every site, every location around the world in Harte-Hanks. So I've made it clear that there will be nothing happening until I've completed that exercise by end fall. And then I'll speak to the board. I'll talk to the Harte-Hanks board about what the future brings from there. And then we'll begin planning our way forward. And I expect to learn quite a bit when we're developing our strategic plan, just as much when I'm traveling around. That'll help me get on board as well.
Any thoughts about, as you move into research, whether it's going to be more oriented towards the vendor side as opposed to the client side, or maybe vice versa, or maybe equally?
No, I kind of made a vow to myself that before I started this, that I wouldn't come into it with preconceived ideas of what it might look like, what a strategy might look like, or we will go after this or we go after the other. I've got to take my time and get on board. I've got to listen to some very knowledgeable people in this company about where they see the industry going. And until I complete that, I'm not even going to hazard a guess.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you think is important for myself or our viewers to understand about this situation?
For me, one of the most important things comes back to something that I spoke to you about last year when we had a conversation about data, which I think is that there's so much more development going to take place around who owns that data, who gives you permission to use it, whether the consumer will ultimately own the data rather than doing deals to pull it from either a manufacturer, a distributor, an agency, or something like that. So I think that there's a tremendous amount of development of the data industry still to take place. And my aim is to make sure, of course, that Harte-Hanks is at the center of that.
Before you even got involved in this situation, were you an advocate of the idea that data-driven information and knowledge and such was going to eventually kind of push out survey-based research?
An advocate, I could see it happening. I could see that was a trend, that we were now because of technology primarily, we were collecting so much information as a byproduct of everything else that we were doing. And the thought of being so intrusive as a market researcher to call somebody at 8 o'clock at night, then ask for their recall of something they did a month ago, there's space for that. There undoubtedly is space for that. But increasingly, all of that information was going to be available in a good technical format with more reliability. And as computing power was increasing, as we were able to combine information more effectively, of course that was going to offer a challenge. And I believed it then, I believe it now.
Okay. Robert, best of luck and thank you very much for your time today.
Not at all. Thank you, Bob.